For 18 years, Gerard Butler has kept one secret about 300 hidden in plain sight. You've seen this scene 1,000 times, but you never noticed the one physical detail Butler was forced to hide to keep the legend of King Leonidas alive. Today, the truth about what really happened in the Sparta pit is finally coming out. What seemed like a display of peak physical perfection was actually a desperate battle against severe injury and agonizing pain. A secret that threatened to expose a truth the studio went to extreme lengths to bury, forcing a complete biological collapse behind the scenes. When Zack Snyder's 300 stormed into theaters in 2006, it didn't just break box office records, it completely revolutionized the visual language of modern action cinema. Grossing over $456 million on a modest $65 million budget, the film became an overnight cultural phenomenon. The image of the hyper-shredded, bronze-skinned Spartan warrior became the gold standard of male physical fitness, launching 1,000 fitness trends and cementing Gerard Butler as an icon of raw, primal masculinity. But behind the flawless, high-contrast CGI skies and the airbrushed comic book aesthetic lay a brutal, agonizing reality that the cast and crew had to endure every single day. The contrast between the film's perfect, digitized visual polish and the raw, bone-breaking physical trauma experienced by the actors is one of the greatest paradoxes in Hollywood history. For nearly 2 decades, the myth of the effortless Spartan warrior was carefully maintained by studio publicists. But recently, Gerard Butler and his co-stars have begun to speak out, revealing that the set of 300 was not a controlled Hollywood studio, but a chaotic, high-stakes war zone where human bodies were pushed to the absolute brink of collapse, and sometimes well past it. This disconnect between the pristine digital aesthetic and the physical wreckage of the actors is where our story truly begins. To truly comprehend the scale of the physical toll, we have to look at the legendary preparation that preceded the shoot. The actors were subjected to the infamous 300 workout, a grueling training regimen designed by mountaineer Mark Twight. This was not a standard bodybuilding routine. It was a psychological assault designed to induce absolute physical exhaustion. The routine consisted of 300 reps of intense compound movements, including pull-ups, deadlifts, push-ups, box jumps, and floor wipers, all performed without a single second of rest. This training was so intense that it literally altered the physiology of the actors, forcing their bodies to adapt to extreme stress. But when filming actually began on the green screen stages in Montreal, the real danger started. First, consider the heavy, rigid leather and bronze armor worn by the actors, which caused severe joint compression and chronic spinal misalignment. Second, during a highly choreographed battle sequence, a stuntman turned around only to have a spear plunged directly into his eye. Third, on another day, an actor executing a routine leap fell awkwardly, snapping his ankle with a sickening crunch that echoed through the silent studio. Gerard Butler himself was not immune to this carnage, suffering from severe, debilitating overuse injuries in his right arm and his left foot. These weren't minor aches, they were structural failures that made basic movements agonizing. Yet, because he was playing King Leonidas, a man who represented the pinnacle of Spartan invincibility, Butler could not show even a flicker of pain. But here is the most shocking twist of all. The injuries and the constant hospital runs were not just tragic accidents. They were the result of a deliberate, hidden choice made by Zack Snyder and his production team. They realized that to capture the true, desperate spirit of the Battle of Thermopylae, they couldn't rely on acting alone. They needed real, unsimulated physical exhaustion. But what if I told you that during the filming of the iconic This Is Sparta kick, Gerard Butler was suffering from an agonizing, hidden physical rupture that could have permanently paralyzed him on set if the stunt had gone even slightly wrong? What if the legendary kick that defined a generation was actually a high-stakes gamble with Butler's spine? In just a moment, we will reveal the exact frame where you can see his body failing. But first, we have to look at the hidden architecture of the kick itself. Let us analyze the This Is Sparta scene with a level of detail you have never considered before. When King Leonidas kicks the Persian messenger into the deep well, the movement looks incredibly fluid, powerful, and effortless. But in reality, Butler was dealing with a severe, undiagnosed hip flexor tear and a looming hernia. The biomechanics of a front kick require a massive amount of core stabilization and explosive hip extension. To execute this kick without showing pain, Butler had to engage in a profound mental deception. If you look closely at the scene, frame by frame, you can see the precise moment where his physical limitations had to be digitally and strategically masked. Before the kick, Leonidas stands in a wide, low stance. This stance was specifically chosen not just because it looked imposing, but because it allowed Butler to distribute his weight away from his injured left foot. When he raises his right leg to deliver the blow, his standing leg is trembling violently. To hide this tremor, Zack Snyder utilized a technique known as color crushing in post-production. By drastically darkening the shadows and increasing the contrast, the digital effects team literally hid the physical tremors and the visible swelling in Butler's legs. Furthermore, the digital team had to carefully airbrush out the surgical tape and skin color bandages that were wrapped around Butler's joints. The perfect, sculpted bronze abs you see on screen were not just the result of diet and exercise. They were enhanced with digital painting to cover up the deep purple bruising caused by constant impact with heavy shields. This reveals a fascinating counterintuitive perspective. The highly stylized comic book aesthetic of 300 was not just an artistic choice. It was a functional necessity, a digital cloaking device used to hide a cast of actors who were physically disintegrating under the demands of the shoot. The technical details of how this illusion was maintained are a masterclass in cinematic deception. The filmmakers relied heavily on speed ramping, a technique where the frame rate of the camera is dynamically adjusted in the middle of a shot. By capturing a movement at high speed and then slowing it down, or vice versa, the editors could manipulate the perception of physical effort. When Butler was too exhausted to swing his sword with real force, he would perform the movement slowly and deliberately. In the editing room, they would speed up the initial swing to make it look blisteringly fast, and then slow it down at the moment of impact to emphasize the bone-crushing power. This masked the severe muscle fatigue and allowed the actors to look like unstoppable warriors even when their muscles were entirely depleted of glycogen. Another technical trick involved the audio design. The metallic clashing of swords and the visceral thud of shields were mixed at an incredibly high volume to distract the viewer's subconscious. When your brain is overwhelmed by powerful, heavy sound effects, you are far less likely to notice the subtle physical tells of exhaustion, such as a slightly unstable stance or a delayed reaction time. Additionally, the prop department had to quietly transition from heavy, authentic materials to lightweight replicas. While the actors started the shoot wielding real heavy bronze shields and solid wooden spears, by the middle of production, many of these props were secretly replaced with dense foam and carbon fiber alternatives. This was done not just for safety, but to prevent the actors' wrists and shoulders from giving out entirely, which would have shut down the multi-million-dollar production. We can see concrete examples of this physical breakdown throughout the final cut of the film if we know where to look. Take, for instance, the quiet scene where King Leonidas walks through the narrow mountain pass of Thermopylae, surveying the landscape. As he walks, his gait is slightly stiff, his torso tilted forward to relieve pressure on his lower back. This was not a character choice, it was the physical manifestation of Butler's severe lumbar strain. Another telling example occurs when Leonidas kneels before the Persian god King Xerxes. If you zoom in on Butler's thighs, you can actually see the muscle fibers in his quadriceps twitching uncontrollably. These are muscle fasciculations, a direct symptom of severe dehydration and neurological fatigue. The production was shot on hot, enclosed stages under intense studio lights, and the actors were constantly dehydrating themselves to maintain their shredded, shrink-wrapped muscle definition. This dangerous practice, combined with the brutal physical exertion, meant that their muscles were constantly on the verge of cramping and tearing. Ultimately, the 18-year secret of 300 is that the legendary strength of King Leonidas was not just a product of visual effects and clever acting. It was forged in real, agonizing physical sacrifice. Gerard Butler and his fellow actors literally broke their bodies to bring Zack Snyder's vision to life, enduring a set that felt more like a real ancient battlefield than a modern film production. This raw, unfiltered pain is precisely why the film still resonates so powerfully today. You cannot fake that level of primal intensity. If you want to discover how Zack Snyder used these exact same digital deception techniques to hide an even bigger secret on the set of Watchmen, click on the video on your screen right now. We will break down the hidden visual tricks that changed Hollywood forever.